like I had mentioned to Jonathan, I'm not really gonna talk too much on the record with you guys about like how clipping came to be and all, like what the heck is experimental hip hop, all that shit. If we're gonna talk like this is
They can look that up.
exactly. There's enough on the record with you guys like talking about the origins, as cool as it is. Just because I was just mentioning to Jonathan, just like the trajectory of both like David on his own thing and you guys, and what I think is this wave of like film and sound design artists that are like becoming like I think like the weirdos are gonna take over. We're gonna have no more John Williams in 30 years. It's only gonna be weirdos, I hope.
We
So
are we already don't have John Williams
that's
anymore. I
true.
mean, like
That's true.
nobody writes like that.
That's true. But they teach it. That's the problem. As a professor going through a lot of these motions, and I'm sure you guys
Yeah.
might have noticed this too. He's not like he's still a topic. So blah blah blah. You guys
Well,
are
but also he shouldn't not be a topic. I'm not against John
Yeah.
Williams. Like, and honestly, I'll be sad if for some reason we don't. With like, if in 20 years someone wants to make a swashbuckling movie, if we don't have someone who can write like sweeping romantic Corn Gold style music for that purpose,
I
like
just
we can't lose that
I-
entirely.
I'm
I
so fucking terrified of that Animaniacs reboot that's about to come
Uh-oh.
out because I'm just like,
Uh-oh.
what is the music going to sound like? The music is such a huge part of that, and
True.
it's like,
gonna be
and no one can write that way anymore. Like, no one's writing
it's
that
gonna
way.
be trap music, UK drill Animaniacs, like I don't know.
I'm afraid that that trailer worked, but it was like the fake Jurassic Park.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you know who did that? You know who did that trailer? It was Bryce Miller.
Who's
That
that?
he's like he's a friend of Hal's. I really like his solo records.
Oh, cool.
He's on his stuff on Bandcamp is really good, but he does like trailer music as his day job.
That's a whole
Uh,
other industry, just
yeah,
besides film scoring. Trailer music is its own bag. But yeah, I didn't mean like exclusively weird, but it's becoming much more, I would say, like accepted in the mainstream circles as a part of our plethora, our sort of a tool shed of ideas, especially like synthesis and like noise and things kind of bridging from blurring the line between sound design and music is really what I'm getting at, because I think that like the noise artists and the Trent Reznors and the Johan Johanssons are the types that kind of recognize that from the where they started, you know. But
Yeah.
like, it's a different upbringing versus the John Williams, which, to me, there has to be equal inclusion of all of the above for education in film program, like film scoring MFAs moving forward, which there are definitely more and more of them now. I went to one technically at Brooklyn College. They have like a Sonic Arts film scoring MFA program there. So anyways, like I said, we're not going to do the whole bio. I wanted to get into some heady ass questions related to sound, related to clipping, related to genre, because a lot of the time people who don't necessarily know much about noise but know more about hip hop, there's a lot of conversations about you guys, like there's controversy, no doubt, and it kind of falls into what maybe what we call it experimental hip hop of the past 10 years, like Death Grips, Blackie, you guys, kind of like that post Yeezus sound in a lot of ways, because I feel like Kanye was listening to a lot of the weirdest shit, and Yeezus wasn't necessarily weird by our standards, but it was weird for him, you know.
It did come out 6 months after our first album.
Ooh, shit. I was
So
gonna say that was definitely a timing thing. And I know that he was when he was in New York, he was going to Issue Project Room, like Swedish harsh noise acousmatic shows with like, his entourage, the harshest shit. Like I had a friend working there, and he's like in the front row of this like acousmatic computer music, like harsh shit.
ooh, do you remember whose show he was at?
I have no idea, but it was the Swedish Energies show at Issue Project Room in Brooklyn. I'll ask my friend who was one of the coordinators for that show, because she was basically like, "Holy shit, Kanye's here," you know, and he's really digging this like very harsh shit. But anyways, does when I was looking up the latest record, which by the way, loved it, as I had mentioned to Jonathan, my favorites now are the latest and the first. So we have both ends of the spectrum as far as where I line up aesthetically with it. But looking on like YouTube and seeing how it, because you know there are like automatic, people put like tags on genre and shit, like hashtag. They literally says like hashtag experimental hip hop under the like probably illegal stream of the whole album that you have.
Yeah.
But they also put horrorcore, which is like, okay, I wanted to ask you guys, what is genre to you when approaching a project such as clipping, which by this point, I'm assuming you guys have some pretty good like creative liberties as far as the direction of the project. So what is the conscious sort of compositional production process? Are you thinking about genre? Are you thinking about consciously fucking up genre, you know, anti-genre? I don't know. You tell me.
No, I mean it's very much. I think it's very much within genre. I mean, we are, you know, we don't work in a way that is like, oh, like we're just jamming and we're like feeling it, and this is who I am. I'm just channeling what I'm feeling right now, and I don't care about genre, man. I'm a product of all my influences, and I just do this. It just comes out of me, man. Like, no, this is so calculated.
Right.
We are interested in genre. I mean, I obviously I recognize genre is. I mean, basically, genre only exists as like a marketing category to say,
Right.
to sell people on shit, to say, if you like this, then you'll like this,
Right.
buy this. But at the same time, like because of how calculated and precise, or just like sort of consciously we make our music, it's always about genre for us. Because every time we start a song, it's really about like, what is clipping's take on a particular genre, a particular type of thing, or how do we mash up these like we speak in genre to each other, like this type of a song plus this type of a song with this type of experimental technique or something. So it's always very consciously working within genre. And if you ask us, like, we have a very clear idea of the genre of each of our songs, even if it's like, oh, it's this type of a technique plus this regional hip hop genre from a certain time period and a certain, a certain collection of artists. So we're always working in genre as if it's like this sort of, I mean, that's our scaffolding. That's our like sort of structure that builds everything. So yeah, we don't just sort of.
You're not just making harsh noise and fucking around and David just like ciphering over some complete free improvised noise.
Right. I mean, but even then, like, that's a genre as well. That's got a history. That's got a structure too.
Exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right. So yeah, you guys are, the musicological approach is must come in handy. Jonathan, I'm sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I mean, we always say that, right? That we don't jam and how calculated this is, but we're also like, we're operating within a structure, and then a lot of the sounds that we use are the sounds that just do come out of us, that come out of our training and come out of our taste and come out of who we are. And just because, like, my approach to like using a modular synthesizer is not to just like turn all the knobs and plug in a bunch of random cables. Like, I know exactly what sound I'm trying to make when I start plugging things in, but that doesn't mean that it's not somehow personal, I think, too, right? I think it's like precision and calculation are also weirdly very personal to us. I think, and this is something that's taken me years to learn, is that clipping, trying to be this incredibly impersonal project devoid of a central identity, has actually become an incredibly like specifically representational, like specifically represents who we are as people and what our taste is in a way that I don't think any of us expected.
Yeah. Well, and knowing what you want to do is like, that's who we are. Like, just because we know what we want to do, and like that is our personality, that is who we are. That is our version of jamming is a 2-hour conversation where we're playing each other songs and being like, let's make something that does this, that does this, that does this, and then setting out to make it. It's no less, I would say it's no less personal. It's just, we are very calculated in this project specifically.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in all parts of our lives or all music we make, but in this project, this is what it is. And I certainly don't mean to make it sound like it's, like somehow less personal or less deeply felt than music that is sort of stumbled across. But also, I don't believe most artists when they say they just like, oh, this is just exactly who I am. This is just pure me coming out. And it's like, oh, wow. Well, you should have been born 30 years earlier because then you would have invented the genre you're working in. Right. It's like, oh, yeah, this is just exactly what I sound like. And you're like, you sound like Young Thug. So too bad you weren't born in the fucking 70s. You would have been fucking radical. You would have blown everyone's mind if that's just you without any influence or any fucking calculation.
You're very passionate about this. I appreciate that because it's true. No, I have, and Jonathan can attest, I've always roasted people for like having like all of this content and no context. Like they just said, my art represents me. Like, this is it. Like this, what you see is what you get. Like, there's no need for me to explain or articulate my ideas because my ideas is the art. You know what I mean? And that's just bullshit so often. It's just bullshit all the time. Like you said, like if you were sound like Young Thug and you say like, nah, like this is like coming from deep within me. It's just like, then you have Young Thug deep within you. You know what I mean? Like that's part of you, man, But anyways, no, I appreciate you guys in telling me how deliberate you guys are because this was actually going into my next question related to, bridging gaps in genre, specifically in like hip hop production, like electronic music production for hip hop. We have so many motifs that I feel you guys are tapping into. Maybe it's regional, maybe it's a more general or an era, but something like the 808 what's it called, the sprinkler hi-hats, like the classic trap sprinkler hi-hats, or the sub bass 808, not the drum but like the bass synthesizer 808. Like this was to me as if you're pushing in on these motifs that have become so recognizable in mainstream hip hop and then pushing them to the extreme where now we're entering something that's almost musique concrète, that's almost harsh noise, but not necessarily like leaving hip hop. It's still the element motif right there, but now all of a sudden it's like, what if we just had a verse with just the kick, just the 808 kick, or you know what I mean? Like something you wouldn't necessarily expect in like a club banger, and yet it has all the tools of it. It's just you've exaggerated the tools to this new extent to me that feels like we're bridging noise, drone, ambient, whatever into something you wouldn't necessarily expect in hip hop. Go. Respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we're definitely interested in those sort of samples without being samples. Those like really like super referential sounds and playing with them. We're interested in using them as much as we're interested in avoiding them, and still sort of, well, how can this feel like it has all those sounds in it without having any of those sounds in it? But for me, it's always about like, this project has always been about pushing in like two different directions simultaneously. It's like, how can we make the most accessible poppy, like cookie earwormy thing with the least conventional, like the least accessible sounds, or like the sounds that are commonly associated with, I don't mean least accessible because they're obviously very accessible to us, but like the sounds that are associated with like music that's impenetrable, right?
Harsh Noise Wall is such a good example of that, because you guys, every single record we have some wall, and that is literally like think about unpenetrable music. It's concrete, baby.
But it's it's not. It's just like, I mean, it's like there's nothing like biological or inherent about that sound that is like impenetrable, right? It's just culturally learned, right? And in the same way that like the three of us have probably culturally learned to receive endorphins from that sound. Like, you know, like other people have just learned that it's quote unquote not music. What I find so fascinating about music in general, and this is a huge generalization, is that like the more most other art forms don't work like this, right? The more abstract sound gets, the more like culturally accessible it becomes, and the less abstract sound gets, the less people want to even view it as art, right? Like if you go see Peter and the Wolf and you hear a clarinet and someone says that's a cat, everyone applauds and says it's beautiful. But if you go to a concert and somebody plays a recording of their cat, everyone's like, that's not fucking music. You know, whereas like painting is the opposite, right? Or like photography or dance or anything, or dance is kind of, you know, in a way. But I find that really interesting, right? And so it's like, you know, like we all know these sounds and they are all super accessible, right? Musique concrète should be the most accessible music because it's the thing that you encounter every day, right? And it's and so it's kind of an interesting, it's fun for me to play with that in clipping songs, but in like sound design work in general too, right?
Yeah.
I was going.
And what I would say regarding the use of like well-known or sort of like, so whenever we use like a particular drum sound that maybe is recognizable from other music, we're doing so as like a cultural reference. We're not doing it because, oh, this song needs a hi-hat, that's the hi-hat. It's like, that is a particular hi-hat and we're using it like a sample. We want you to hear the reference. We want that to point to all of the cultural baggage it already has. And then I think what gets lost, or like not really necessarily outside of the room when that is the three of us making a song, I don't think people who hear us necessarily realize like how much we're like, how fun and how much, like how many jokes we think there are in our songs, right? Like, so in Lacing, the way the swarms of hi-hats work was there was a joke that Jonathan was like, what if hi-hats are like a bunch of birds in a tree and the kick drum scares all the hi-hats out of a tree every time you hear it. So every time the hi-hats are playing this just little pattern that I programmed, and then he goes, boom, and then they all go scatter, 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 like they flying away like birds. And it's like,
get your fucking to the right.
Yeah, and that makes us all laugh every time.
But and that's an example of kind of pushing those two directions too. It's like, I love sprinkler hats, and it's like, well, what if they weren't on a grid, right? What if they weren't 16ths, triplets, 30 seconds? What if they were just these granular clusters of hi-hats that could then like condense back into this sort of standard pattern? So the hi-hats on that one, the Max patch, that does that.
Cool.
It's just like poly filled with every 808 hi-hat sample, and like, putting like 10,000 of them at once. Yeah.
That sounds about right, that you would have something like that. Yeah, because I was gonna say, I mean, like, on a few of these tracks, it's like very clear, like this is the single, like in Lacing or Neve Campbell, like these are the fucking bangers as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously the label will want one or two of these to push. Not even.
They don't care. We can do whatever we want.
Cool.
Like we can do literally anything we want on Sub Pop.
I was literally just about to say that. So is there a freeing element now that you are, several albums in, that people might recognize, like Daveed Diggs rapping over something weird as clipping, but what that something weird has varied so much, so that's the freeingness of it, as you just said.
I mean, I was super nervous when we first started talking to them that they would be more like making a film score, right? That we'd be turning in like things for notes, basically. And at some point in our conversations, our A&R rep, and maybe I actually shouldn't say, whatever, fuck it. He was like, look, we're not signing you guys because we don't like what we were doing and we want to fix it. We like it. And then there were all these clauses in the contract about like how much control they had over artwork. And I was like really asking for clarifications, but it says you guys can reject it. And like, what is this actually going to mean in practical? And he's like, look, you guys can do whatever you want. These are just in here to prevent you from doing something illegal. You think if like we actually like gave notes and feedback and control over artwork, we would have let that fucking Coco Rosie album look like that? Like, and
True.
like
true.
stuff like, so they have literally let us do anything we want. The only note they gave us on the self-titled record, CLPPNG, was our Tony was like, that intro is just like a little bit harsh and fast for like the first thing that you hear on a record. We were like, and so we went back and totally remade it louder and faster.
And it was better. It was absolutely
way better.
He was like, it's so harsh. We like made it harsher and faster.
This is the one that starts with the squeal, right? The feedback squeal first, and then he comes in, and then the bass slowly fades in. That's fantastic. Because I was gonna say, I've mentioned this in your comments section. Like, if there's a beat in the intro, I'm out. Like, like it's,
we did it, but we did it on the new one.
I know you did, but here's the thing that's different about this, and this relates to the sound design as music thing. If we take those sounds out, like you said, every sample, every sound is self-referential, right? So if we take out the sounds before the verse in the intro of the latest record, those are your cinematic impacts, right? That's literally, in a world, but now we've recontextualized it as this, the classic brooding pre-song intro that is the clipping intro section, and it's become synonymous. And I actually like that the secret track, secret piece, the last one or whatever, is to me so similar, but the polar opposite in that it's like, it's a field recording thing, it's the outro, if you will. It's a field recording work. But obviously the abrasiveness is now it's the come down versus the intro is always the come up. I don't know.
Well, it was Bill, the first intro that we made, the one on Mid City.
That's the
really harsh one. And Bill, you were just like, we just need to like lay out exactly what the parameters of this project are. So full on fucking harsh noise, rapping, noise, rapping, noise, rapping out,
Loved it.
And just like tell people, hey, this is what you're in for. And it's funny.
But it had to do with, it was us being really bratty. That intro that was like, because it was certain artists were getting called noise rap, and we were like, well, that's not noise, nor is he really rapping. That's just kind of like a sloppy punk singer. I don't think that's really rap. So we're like, let's show them what fucking noise sounds like.
We all know who you're talking about.
Let's show them what noise sounds like. Let's show them what
anybody
sounds like. Could be anybody.
That's true.
We're like, this is what noise is. This is what rapping is.
Yeah.
Most certainly, it's clean. That is, if we're talking that intro specifically, you could bring it down to the tempo, like the 16th note BPM within the wall of noise, and it's so clean. It's like, it's almost like you said, like it's ones and zeros. Like we have the huge up and the huge down, and like you said, it's kind of like the manifesto. Like it's laying out the landscape that we are now about to embark in gradually, but we're approaching it head on.
It's definitely the introductory paragraph in our English 3 essay, or like the,
in this essay, I will.
Yes, I will show that. Yeah, or it's the first kill in a horror movie or something. It's like this is the kind of thing. Yeah. This is the kind of thing you're in for, which I find so satisfying.
I feel like you get the biggest reactions out of people. Like if you go on YouTube, there's so many literal reaction videos to you guys that are like 99% of the time like hip hop blogs, and you'll have these. To me, and this is what you guys are tapping into that I love, is that harsh noise and these sub bass drones that are so isolated and like abrasively bassy. Like you're tapping into the same element that like Lil Jon Get Low did for me in the 6th grade. You know what I mean? Like, and that is literally just, we have our own taught aesthetics as to what gets you fucking hyped, but it's still getting you fucking hyped at the end of the day. To me, you're tapping into that hip hop, like real banger mentality, even if it is harsh noise wall.
Well, yeah, and that's to me also like that's to me what makes this such a personal project, actually, is that like we were trying to make this thing devoid of self and devoid of a center, and which could feel like we're being sort of fraudulent or posers, but it would be so much more fraudulent for us to just make like sample based like boom bap beats, or like, you know, just like straight ahead sort of trap music. But this is like really really tied to our taste and who we are, and it's
Well,
very very personal.
there are such similarities between like Harsh Noise, like you say Lil Jon and Harsh Noise Wall, but it is all about like the power of the like extreme lows, extreme highs, and like think about like what is what is like, especially like West Coast and Southern rap, like what the hell is that about except to try to make either the license plate rattle on your car when you're playing it too loud. Like all of these are like harsh. That's a very Harsh Noise idea, is that the goal of your kick drum is to make parts of your car rattle off. Like,
yeah.
Well, and how good would a Little John Power Electronics be? That's just how Project B, or it's just him
it's
screaming.
just White House. It's just White House with him screaming.
Yeah.
It's like if you when you hear Lil Wayne's "A Milli" from the car next to you in traffic, and that guy is blasting it, and you're only hearing it from outside, and the verse is that break, ka, 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 and then, you know, like that. What is that if not like the embodiment of like the clipping intro, right? You know, like this.
Sounds like Damian Romero. You know, like something like.
Yeah,
I
Spectral
love
Fight
that.
album. Actually,
Yeah.
there is well, yeah.
So getting into just the record itself, I mean, obviously I'm not going to just go down like track per track, but we're seeing to me, more minimalist approach, maybe we could call it that. There's a lot more, to me it feels stripped to a lot of the core elements that in some of the other records, like even with self-titled for for Sub Pop, like you have tracks like was it Work Work, where it's like by the chorus we have the bottles, you know, but then we have the little like Dre synths coming in on the, you know, it feels like we've produced a full piece in a lot of the earlier stuff, and in this case, it's like we're hammering in on the specific idea that's not exaggerated, but like, you know, we're bringing it out to extreme lengths, like things like something underneath the trek there, and even Make Them Dead coming right afterwards. They're both falling into this bass music motif, but they're so stripped down, you know. And I mean, I guess you have some stripped down shit in the earliest shit too, like Bullshit off of Mid City. That is like that's like that's a pop banger I would listen to in the club, but like it's feedback and then just like air for the hook, you know what I mean? It's just air.
The funny thing about that one, because we didn't know what we were doing. That's like the third song we made or something bullshit.
Really?
We
Oh, cool.
And we had this idea that it was like, what if it's like a pop song that's happening over the top of like a concert 2 doors away, and we were like, so it's like somebody rapping and singing over somebody listening to Skinny Puppy too loud, like 2 houses down or something like that. And I made this whole industrial track that we like played through speakers and like reamped and recorded from really far away, and it just sucked so much. And so we just started adding more elements, and then eventually just took that out entirely. And then we had this really empty stripped down thing.
Right.
But it used to be really full and have like tons of real drums and melodies and things.
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I told you I'm pulling out the deep cuts. Yeah, no, but tell me, in relation, I guess, more to the clipping doctrine in general, being that you guys are, as we've determined, very deliberate in your choices with each song and each sound and each sample. What is it to me that to me there's a lot more restraint, I guess is the word I'm feeling in this record, but it's still just as even in the harshest points, like with something like Eaten Alive. That was with the guys from Tortoise, right? Wasn't
One of the guys, it's Jeff from Tortoise, and
right.
then another jazz improv drummer named Ted Burns,
Right.
who who I play with all the time. Who's one of our best friends, one of my best friends, and he plays with Jeff every once. Whenever Jeff wants to get like way out there, he'll call Ted. Ted's the drummer who's gonna jump on your absolutely weirdest project
Right.
or your weirdest shows.
Well, that's why that particular track is so strong to me, because there's a restraint as improvisers will restrain themselves in a live context. Like free improv and stuff it should never always just be about bombastic all the time. To me, it felt like the most live communication ensemble feel, maybe just because we're dealing with live drummers. Were you guys involved in a live element of that, or was that letting them go and then you produce on top of it?
We made like a whole track. We started that song not knowing that they were going to play on it. We had our own like sort of like constrained studio technique making that beat that I think we're going to have to reuse on something else, because it's not really in that track anymore. And
Yeah.
we made this whole thing. Then we came up with we were going to record with this harpist for something else that's actually not even out yet and may never come out. I don't know. And so we're like, oh, what if we put harp on this? Cause we're going to do this whole session with this harp player. So I wrote like a 12-tone row for harp, and then had a composer friend help me make it playable on harp and like figure out all the variations that are actually playable on harp. Cause I don't know how fucking tools work and stuff.
Orchestration.
Harp is hard. Harp sucks. I mean, it's
Freshman,
amazing.
Freshman year of composition seminar was rewriting down Barrios sequenza for harp, and it just like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. I want to be able to do that, but I don't actually want to do it. Anyway, so we recorded that. And then we had this whole track, and then David wrote to it, and Bill was like, what if we have Jeff and Ted play on this? I was like, that's a great idea. And so we brought them in the studio and heard them start playing, and we muted, I think, all but like one element from our original beat. So it's not not that different a story from the bullshit story, right? That we started with this totally different thing and then ended up with like muting all but like one or two of the elements. I guess that's happening more too. But
go ahead, Bill. What were you gonna say on that?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have anything to.
Okay. I thought I was interrupting.
No.
No, I was just saying because to me, obviously, there's the live drumming element involved, but I was just curious if there's a live electronics in that practice, and that kind of relates me to this. I guess this will be the big one, but with your process in general, how often is it the three of you in a room, conversation being the first part of it, and then what comes next? Production, lyricism on top of production. How often is that a in-studio collaboration where you're building something from scratch and David might not hear it until it's complete, or is hearing it as it's being developed? What's that process like?
It's usually, everything usually starts with a sort of a conversation. Either usually between all three of us, but sometimes just between me and Jonathan if David's not around. And one of the things that we do generally is David's usually like maybe a couple tracks behind where we're working. And so what'll happen is we'll be working on something. He'll have a beat that he still needs to write to from like the previous session. We'll hang out, we'll play what we're working on, we'll talk about what we're trying to do. We'll be like, okay, we want to make a track that does this, that's like this, that's about that, and we all agree on it. Then he'll go upstairs from the studio, just above where Jonathan is sitting now, and he'll, with his headphones, he'll write to the previous beat that we made the last time we were there. And then he'll record that, we'll switch to that. But during his writing, Jonathan and I will be making the next thing, so that the next time he comes over, he'll write to that. And so he's always usually like one or two behind us, catching up, so that there's always beats for him to write to. But generally he's involved in the conversation about what the beat is going to be.
Because I was going to say, no, go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, not always anymore, just on a practical level, because the schedule is so insane. And I mean, the last 7 months, we haven't been in the same room,
Of course.
But when it works best, that's the way it works, right? That we like get a few days here where we can, because we've also done stuff where we've recorded at other studios where we show up with a pile of beats that we made here, and then we record in another studio that's not this room, and that's a little bit tricky because most studios don't, like I've set this room up in a very particular way for us to be able to do the kind of work that we do very quickly and easily. And if you're in a traditional studio, you just can't do the same kind of stuff. You can do other things, but not the things that we have come to rely on.
Yeah, because you're just kind of, from that point, it's just stems, right? You can't tweak anything specific on your end as far as like the hardware goes or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, like you can do a lot on just a laptop without all this shit, obviously, too. And we do stuff that, there are some songs that don't have anything that wasn't generated inside a computer on them too, occasionally. But it's not as like, it's really nice to be able to say, oh, we need this kind of modular sound. Let's make it right now on the real thing. Right. We also work a lot. We work a lot with placeholder sounds. And we'll like sketch something out using all software synths. Cool. and then say like, oh, and then because it is really easy to change the key or the tempo or like, and then we'll remake all the sounds on other stuff.
Once we're sure that something's a good idea, we'll have a demo that might be just entirely in software, and then we'll say, well, now that we know that this is a good idea, here are the real sounds we want in this. So it's like, yeah, I mean, we sometimes make stuff with like 808s that there are no 808s in the final product. It's just how we laid out those, like the particular as an idea.
Here's something that feels kicky, or something that feels, usually those are like more conceptual tracks. Like sometimes I always like starting from a timbral place too, right? Writing with the sound from the beginning, I think is usually more interesting. But sometimes just for the sake of convenience or time or knowing, or like thinking forward, like knowing that we're probably going to have to change the key or tempo or do something to it, or just like, it's like, I have this idea for a bass sound, but I don't want to spend an hour making a bass sound right now. I just want to see if this melody works and like this thing happens. So like Nothing Is Safe on There Existed, the John Carpenter one that's really melodic and really tonal and really pitched. That a software only demo of that was floating around for like a year before we started replacing any of the sounds.
Interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I guess with MIDI software, you're able to compose and record, like tweak and post. The line is a lot blurred versus like finally recording to tape with the hardware and being like, we've thought it out now, the executive decision, this is it. That's interesting though.
Actually, on that song, in the main synth like bass line that starts the song and plays through the whole thing, there was like in the MIDI notes, when we actually made the right thing, like one of the notes was slightly too short in a way that like really bugged me. Like the note release was like not in the right way. Yeah. And so like we spent a day remaking that sound and never got it right. And I finally we had to just do it with editing the audio because we never got it to sound as good. And it was like very frustrating. We're usually like really, really, really precise about that stuff. Like I don't really do time stretching or like audio quantization or like pitch correction or like any of the like sort of what I would think of as like the Ableton tools, that are just inherent in all audio in Ableton. Like we try to avoid that because the artifacts sometimes are interesting, but like if you can avoid them, you get a cleaner, crisper, more intentional sound. So like, and that's true of the vocals too. Like if David does an overdub that's out of time, we make him redo it. We don't shift it around.
Right. Yeah, we try to make him do everything, and we also try not to punch in. I mean, he does most verses straight through. There are very few.
How could he punch himself in with that? That is so. That would be hard.
Well, we used to actually at the beginning.
In the old days that we used to that he couldn't actually. He wrote them too fast and couldn't say them all at once. But
a lot of times what happens too, like this happened with Something Underneath, actually. He recorded that song like 3 or 4 times because he wrote it in a studio. We recorded it, cut it together. It was so fast. And then he like learned the song over the next 6 in a year and just kept re-recording it himself until he just got it. And then the recording in it is like recording number 4. We used to in the olden days, when he had time, we would only record demo vocals here,
Mm.
and then knowing we would do all the songs knowing that the vocals weren't final, and then we would go to a studio. Our engineer Steve Kaplan, we would record with him,
Got it.
partially because he has better mics and preamps and rooms and it sounds better, but also because his ears are so good. Like watching him sort of help produce a vocal session is really kind of amazing. And it made, I mean, David was always a great rapper, but doing a couple of albums with Steve Kaplan has made him such a good rapper now,
Yeah.
like a good recording rapper. Like we don't have to do any of the like nudging. We don't nearly have to do as many takes as before, which is good because we don't have time.
Yeah.
And usually the demo is the final at this point, you know.
Yeah,
but
I feel like that's the hardware versus software dilemma, is that like you guys are deliberate and you're practicing like anyone, like a first chair violinist would in an orchestra, right? Like you're playing these synths and these hardwares knowing that like if take number 48 is going to be the take, like you're rehearsing it, just like David with his verse right there. I mean, like he learns the song in the sense, and specifically with which something underneath, like it's to me like still beatless, you know, like it's something that needs to be felt more than like grooved, you know, like I mean learned in a abstract way, not in like a straight up like I'm rocking to it, like punch me in at 8, you know. It's different.
yeah, I mean that's a little, I don't know, that might be a little unfair. Like I definitely don't think the things that Bill and I do, like there's not as much of a one-to-one correlation as the like the kind of rigor required by like a first year violinist or what David does, because we're almost never doing anything in real time,
Okay.
you know.
Okay.
like and we do not have the same kind of, like we don't have to get up every day and play scales, you know what I mean, like just to make sure that we are like barely okay, like I you know what I mean, like
okay, so real time isn't the right way of
yeah,
putting it, but the precision and attention to detail is there. That's
yeah,
definitely that's definitely
Yeah, but it's very much something else to like musical virtuosity, or at all like David's sort of performance dexterity and virtuosic like rapping. I think we have all the time in the world to to make something work in a different way, you know, like we can.
yeah. And we do have a bunch of like really kind of maybe arbitrary and silly seeming rules, like, you know, like if we make like a hi-hat on the modular out of like pink noise, it's just like a filtered pink noise, like do 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 do,
yeah.
we don't record one bar of it and loop it, we record like 5 minutes of it,
Whole
and then,
song. Yeah,
you know,
So that everyone's
like
just,
the
yeah.
the alarm in Get Up is not a loop.
That is a
Yeah.
through recording of an alarm sitting in a vocal booth with a mic pointed at it.
And it's like take 12 or something, because it was a stereo XY pair over the alarm, and I kept like moving it ever so slightly to get it like to feel exactly right. And I had this stupid idea also that it needed to be like a true start and a true end to the alarm too. So I would like reposition the mics and then like set the alarm for like 2 minutes from now, and then run downstairs and hit record and wait and like wait for the alarm to go off. I figured out, I was in like, wait, I should just test to see if I can just edit in and out of this, and I could seamlessly. So then I stopped doing that. But it was a lot of takes.
It's like physical ingenuity. These ideas that are, to me, reminds me of like Ben Burt and like the Barons, what is it?
Yeah.
B and BB.
BB and yeah, those guys doing
Louis.
yeah, Louis and BB doing literally everything themselves as physically and as like personally as they can. Like a loop feels impersonal when you just drag it out. You know, if you can record something in repetition and find little artifacts on the 60th take of it that weren't there when you nudged it this way, you know, thank God, at least we're not using tape reels like BB was using, or even even Ben Burt in the 70s and 80s. But still, you guys are making it so that a repetition has to be viewed as an object in a long duration, rather than like what we consider like an FL Studio to traditional loop or something, cut and
Yeah.
paste, you know?
One of my favorite ones of those is that on Nothing Is Safe, John Snyder, who is an astonishingly great pianist, plays every one of those bink, 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 just one note all the way through.
Amazing.
And we made him do it. He was
We made him a score because there are a couple of rests, and he did a take where he missed one, and he was like, "Do I really have?" And I was like, "Yep, gotta do it again."
We were also in like the nicest studio in the world. We were at the wasn't that at the Bridge? Or
I was at the Bridge.
It was a film scoring studio that we were like after hours like tacking on extra take. So he's on this Steinway grand piano in this beautiful like orchestra, like this room designed to record orchestras, and he's just going tink 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 tink
Incredible.
for 4.5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah,
you have to get it.
I think it makes a difference.
Overkill, like that's the most overkill. Like the quality of that studio and the quality of that player for what it is. That's maybe the most overkill of anything on our records.
Yeah, at least that wasn't the only thing we were doing at that session. Like we had a whole session of like chamber music booked.
Got it. So it wasn't just like, all right.
Oh, we didn't do it just for that. Yeah, that we tacked that on.
I mean, so many of our recordings are tacked on like that though. Like we, like me working in film, like we have access to some to sessions sometimes where it's like, oh, hey, can we just like get you to do this 30-second thing at the end of this crazy session you have booked? Yeah,
because there was some orchestration on this record too with what was the one that with the Pain Every Day, right?
Oh, well that's just one cellist tracked 4 times, and I recorded that. I recorded that in here. I tend to write when I'm doing film scores too. Like I tend to try to write for people, not instruments.
That's a good call.
And I was working on that track and kind of started playing chords over the end of it. And I had been talking to Kaylee, who's been a good friend for years and years, but she had just moved to LA from New York, and I was like, hey, this would be a fun thing to try to do together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's probably the only instance of, besides like maybe some acoustic drums here and there on the record, like acoustic sound, recognizably acoustic or straight ahead orchestral sounds, which, we hear in hip hop all the time. Like, I mean, now it's like there are YouTube videos of there's a whole YouTube series of Chief Keef and other people playing with orchestras. Did you guys see that shit? Like, I'll send you the link. It's actually fucking Sosa,
I'm sure.
Sosa for chamber ensemble, bro. It's serious.
All right.
Love Sosa for string quartet with a.
Are they just playing a loop?
Pretty much, but he's got the live auto tune on it, so it's
all these bitches
real.
love Sosa.
Exactly. No, it's fantastic.
Sounds good.
The song's great.
It's such a fucking good song. No, I'll always love Chief Keef. But it's interesting. It's interesting being that you guys have the film background as well. Like when recognizable instrumental sort of works come into this otherwise more abstract electronic tool shed of sounds that you guys usually use. It's to me, like that was like, oh shit, this is Pain Every Day. This is like the big development in orchestration in like D&B, like there was some glitch drum and bass in there too, which was to me like the most unique track on the record for those particular reasons. It's like, oh shit, this is different,
we always have this, like we each always have this like pile of ideas, that we just haven't managed to make work yet. And sometimes it's like one idea is one song, but then like usually what happens is we get to sort of the tail end of making a record. Pain Every Day was the last thing we made for this record, and we get sort of the tail end, and we're like, whoa, wait, shit, we're almost done with this album, but we haven't done this and this and this and this. Let's put them all in the same song. And so that's one of those. We had this pile of EVP recordings from Michael Esposito that we hadn't used, and we hadn't made a song in a time signature other than 4/4 for that song, for that album.
I gotta go back in here and listen for the time signature now. What is it in that one?
It's in 7/8, and we also, I had because we've made a lot of stuff in weird time signatures, but almost always in compound meters or like with metric modulations or shifting meters or something like that. Very rarely do we just pick up time signature and stick to it that isn't 4/4. And so I was like, well, why don't we just do a straight ahead 7/8 song and it never changes? And that was an idea. And then we were also like excited about doing a breakcore, like a true breakcore track. And so all of those became the same song. And then I had this field recording that I'd made in Seattle of a bridge being destroyed, which ended up becoming the main drum loop because it kind of felt like it was in 7. And that one is like, it's like a lot of confluences rather than a plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We definitely had all these plans and managed to make them all work together. I mean, we had all these EVP recordings, and the thing about EVP recordings is like they're not necessarily designed to be musical. They're designed to hear what a ghost is saying.
Right.
So there's so much like cleanup in them that's like this weird digital, like, so they're very MP3 watery, like very like weird lossy spectral distortion on them. And we were having such a hard time finding a place to put them on the album because it was just a type of sound that was not in other songs. And it's usually a sound like, just because of maybe our age or whatever, it's not a distortion sound that is like pleasant to us. Like we're maybe trying to make it more acceptable, but it's like a sound that we're just like, sounds like LimeWire.
Literally was gonna say
bad
early 2000s MP3 compression, right?
Yeah. So we were sort of stuck thinking like, okay, we really need to make a context for it because we really wanted to use Michael's EVPs. We're like, we really need a context, like not a like a conceptual context, but a like a timbral context that where these don't sound weird in this. So then the fact that breakcore is like, we could do something so digital, like that's how those ideas got stuck together. We could do this very, very sort of harsh, lossy, digital sounding stuff in that track.
Right.
That Good Hurts plugin lossy makes it easier too. I was also working on a movie at the time, or just kind of maybe starting to work on it, that sort of needed that aesthetic in the music and the sound design. I was doing both. That like there's a lot of audio material recorded over Skype or Zoom or something that already had that quality, and so I wanted to kind of lean into it really hard and like try to find a way to make it beautiful. And so it was already like playing in that territory. And then I've actually spent probably like a year and a half now playing in that territory on various projects. I did a radio play right at the start of the shutdown that was like supposed to be a live play at a university. But we pivoted when nobody could meet, we pivoted to doing this radio play and then recorded it on Zoom with like 30 kids, each self-recording on 30 different computers. It sounded like trash, but I was like, okay, so this is what it sounds like. How do we pretend that, like, let's not pretend it sounds good. Let's like make it beautiful and bring it into the aesthetic. And it's been fun to play in that territory. And man, when you hear like a full beautiful like 7.1 like movie sound design just deteriorate into garbage MP3s in all the channels around your head, it's like it's really, I'm coming around on this kind of distortion.
I am as well. I think this was our learning process of learning to love it, in the same way that I'm sure like people born in the 50s thought guitar like distortion pedals and fuzz pedals were like, that's the sound you're trying to avoid. What are you doing? Yeah, right. And then
it's totally generational.
Yeah.
Or like people did not like the sound of like crappy cassette tapes. If you grew up in the 80s, you were like, oh God, I love CDs. Thank God CDs came around. And then all of a sudden in the early 2000s, I was releasing all my noise albums on crappy cassette tapes.
Yeah, right.
Well, I know there's plugins for that too, right? Like
everything is
so many.
Everybody needs to emulate everything at some point, but there's going to be an artist in each generation that's like, or at least a group of artists that will take that thing that you're not supposed to do with the thing and turn it into its new art. I mean, like with tape, obviously there's so much to go with on utilizing distortion and tape recordings. And then CDs, you got Yoshi Wada, you got, real deconstruction of the digital artifact media. So now I feel
Justin Aotone?
No, with Yoshiwada, isn't that the no? Who's the artist?
Yoshi Wada's the drone is a drone
No,
big orange.
who's the Japanese artist that does the CD playback destruction?
Yasune Otone.
Yeah, Tone. Yes, sorry,
And
you said it right.
Nobukazu Takamura's done a bunch of that stuff too.
Yes,
back
yes,
in the
exactly.
day, but yeah.
And that
Well, and I mean, obviously,
Onkyo,
that was,
and
no
disc.
input. Yeah. No
I was
input.
gonna say there was also, that was a who was it? Someone in, was it CD player? Which one of them had CD players in ISO? Otomo, Yoshihide, and
Yoshihide.
Sachiko M, and
Yeah.
So one of them used CD players. I don't remember.
It might
Maybe
be,
it was
it might be
Otomo
Sachiko.
because he was also. Anyway.
Anyways,
And there was disc, of course. The like.
Right.
Oh, Disc. Disc is
left
brilliant. No one
Disc.
remembers Disc.
Oh,
Right.
good.
Yeah, that was Kid 606.
Lesser
Drew,
right? Yeah.
Drew and Martin from Matmos and Jay Lesser,
Oh,
and it was
shit.
all just they would like just scratch CDs and try to play them back. It was like,
I love
it's so good.
I love that shit. And it's not even like you guys are obviously going in that like deliberate, it's all about this. It's one of many effects, but like you said, like finding the beauty in something that our generation immediately is all like, like you have horrible internet right now, you know, like that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So it's turning that into something beautiful, I think, is like, you know, the natural course of art, right? Is finding things that might turn you off and make it turn you on eventually, you know. Like
It's all about intentionality, right?
Right,
like
right.
it's like, you know, because I mean we called our band clipping, right, which is the sort of the first thing that you learn that you're not supposed to do.
Yes.
But then of course any even halfway decent mastering engineer will be intentionally clipping things all the time, right? And it's like it's just all about learning to hear things and then being intentional about when you use this. Like it's not a problem, it's a tool. And that doesn't mean that you should just clip everything all the time, but it does mean that you can sometimes and be intentional about it, and it can be beautiful and useful, right? That there aren't really these hard and fast do's and don'ts.
That's a beautiful sentiment, I feel like, to end on. I don't know if William wants to. I like that we were ending it on, you know, intent, and, you know, like, you know, be real with your shit. And it's like what you said, it's like what you said, William, like, you know, the like, oh, this track is who I am. It's, you know, or you are Young Thug, you know, like in this sense, it's like, you know, it's about just being deliberate and intentional as fuck with everything, every choice that you make, and owning it, right? I don't know if there's any other thoughts you want to put on that, because I know you guys have another interview.
Oh, do we?
Oh, I do. You got out of it because I was the one who responded to the email, and they were like, "No, we only really want one of you." And I was like, "Oh, it's so much better if it's a bunch of us." And so now it's just fucking me talking
Your
about
favorite thing.
God damn it.
Band dynamics.
Enjoy that.
This
Yeah.
year.
For
You guys-
BBC, that'll be nice. It's like they're BBC people.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
I get to talk about Horse Lords, which I'm excited about.
Oh, okay, cool.
They asked for like 3 of my favorite songs from this year, and one of them was Horse
Cool,
Lords. So
awesome.
I'm excited about talking about Horse Lords. But
Well, I hope you guys. I hope this wasn't like pulling teeth for you guys. I hope we had some, like, we could talk about some shit that maybe you don't usually get asked, as far as the usual music journalists go.
Yeah, no, this was great. And also, we said we wanted to do this because we knew it wouldn't be like that. We did not expect you to. So, how did the band form? Did you? How long have you known each other?
what are your favorite horror movies?
Yeah, that's why, and we're coming back to the word horror, because I was very upset that they're putting you down as horrorcore.
Oh, that was us.
Oh, that
We
was
did that.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Fine.
We called it that in our press release because it was, you know, specifically trying to reference like Bone Thugs and Ghetto Boys and Brother Lynch.
Yes. All right. So in that case, I'll allow it. If you decided, I thought this was journalists pigeonholing you in something that you not necessarily want.
Here's my other interview. So
All right,
I'm gonna.
go.
You guys do what you like.
No, good, because I can only upload an hour at a time, so this is perfect.
All right.
Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, William.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you Thank you so much, man. I'll talk to you guys on the interweb soon. And
Yeah,
I'll
man,
I'll
of course.
tag you in the shit if you want to make a little repost or whatever.
For sure. We'll do.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Peace.